All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to see how different preparation methods radically transform the flavor, texture, and application of the humble tomato. Across 6 distinct recipes, the tomato proves it is truly a culinary chameleon. I mean, depending on how you treat it, whether you leave it raw, gently heat it, blend it, or boil it way down for preservation, you get an entirely different experience. Let's look at the exact mechanics behind these transformations.
So, here is our agenda for today. We're moving chronologically. Number 1, raw appeal stuffed and fresh. Number 2, roasting for flavor depth. Number 3, perfecting the pureed sauce. And number 4, preserving, the chutney method.
Okay, section 1, raw appeal, stuffed, and fresh. Looking at our first recipe, paired tomatoes stuffed with boursin, moisture control is literally everything. You know, any professional chef will tell you that if you try to stuff a raw tomato without prepping it first, that filling is just gonna slide right out. So, practicing safe knife skills, you take a sharp paring knife to carefully cut the topmost part off these tiny red and yellow tomatoes and scoop out the seeds. Then comes the absolutely crucial step. You sprinkle a small amount of salt, invert them, and let them drain. The salt actually draws out the excess liquid. Only then do you fill them up with that rich mixture of cream cheese, garlic, fresh basil, chives, dill, and black olives.
Now, think about the balance here for a second. The pasta with fresh basil tomato perfectly balances the heavy, natural sweetness of very ripe Italian tomatoes with the sharp acidity of freshly squeezed lemon juice. Because we aren't cooking the tomatoes, we're just letting them mingle at room temperature with the warm pasta and olive oil, we really need that external acid to brighten the whole dish up. Those 2 tablespoons of fresh lemon juice act as a necessary counterweight to the heavy, sun-ripened sugars of 3 cups of Italian tomatoes. It's all about balance, right?
So the real secret here is matching the tomato's state to its pairings. It's kind of like a giant puzzle. For the fresh basil tomato recipe, raw chopped Italian tomatoes toss beautifully with the textured ridges of radiatore pasta, because those ridges catch all that olive oil and tomato juice perfectly. And for cheese, freshly grated Parmesan adds the sharp, salty bite that completely elevates the fresh sauce. Contrast that with our stuffed pear tomatoes. Those use no pasta at all, relying instead on a heavy cream cheese and boursin base to dictate the mouthfeel and anchor that bite-sized raw vessel.
Moving right along to section 2, roasting for flavor depth.
Now, when you take 2 cups of stemmed red or yellow cherry tomatoes and bake them with olive oil and red wine vinegar, well, you're gently breaking down their cell walls. By baking them at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 to 30 minutes, the moisture inside the tomato actually begins to evaporate. So what does this do? It heavily concentrates and intensifies their natural sugars. You take something that is inherently tart and snappy, and you literally transform it into something soft, sweet, and incredibly rich. And this brilliantly illustrates how roasting directly melds aromatics into the dish. Unlike raw preparations where flavors kind of just sit next to each other, the oven forces them to integrate. The diced red onion and crushed garlic clove bake right alongside the tomatoes in that greased dish. As the tomatoes soften and release their juices, those juices mix with the olive oil, the red wine vinegar, and all those savory notes of the garlic and onion. It creates this warm, comforting profile right there in the baking dish.
All right, on to section 3, perfecting the pureed sauce.
This instruction right here, from the pasta with cherry tomato sauce recipe, puree until smoothened, is doing a lot of heavy lifting. You aren't just squishing the tomatoes. You are loading cooked cherry tomatoes, sautéed onions and garlic, tomato paste, and dissolved cornstarch into a blender. The cornstarch, which you mix with cold water beforehand, acts as a binder. That ensures that once this mixture hits the blender, it achieves this silky, unified texture that won't just separate into a watery mess on your plate.
Check out the stark contrast in sauce construction here between our 2 pureed options. For the cherry tomato sauce, vegetable spirals are the absolute ideal pasta type to capture the umami-rich blend of miso, balsamic vinegar, and tomato. Yeah, miso. It brings a massive savory depth. On the flip side, the creamy green tomato sauce relies on a green tomato puree base enriched heavily by a cup of whipping cream and 2 tablespoons of butter. For a heavy, fat-rich sauce like that, thin linguine or spaghetti is perfect because those long strands get beautifully and evenly coated by the thick, creamy emulsion.
But hey, a smooth sauce doesn't mean a boring sauce. The creamy green tomato recipe proves that even within a pureed sauce, you can build serious complexity through textural layering. After you've simmered that sweet onion, green tomato puree, and cream until it's thick, you don't just serve it soft. No way. You add chewy, intensely flavored chopped sun-dried tomatoes and coarsely crushed whole black peppercorns right over the linguine before serving. This reintroduces a physical bite and a punch of spice that contrasts amazingly with the velvety sauce.
And finally, Section 4, Preserving. The chutney method.
Mum's green tomato chutney is pretty much a masterclass in preservation. Using safe knife skills again, you'll first want to properly wash, trim, and quarter 3 pounds of firm green tomatoes, alongside your apples, sweet peppers, and onions. And here is a fantastic pro tip to save time for all you busy cooks out there. Process these ingredients in a food grinder in batches. Once processed, the whole shebang goes into a massive Dutch oven. You bring it to a slow boil, and then, actually, this is the most critical part. You must simmer it uncovered for 30 minutes while stirring constantly. That evaporates the water and prevents burning, giving you that dense, jammy consistency before you fill your sterilized jars and seal them up.
To put this flavor balancing into perspective, let's contrast these cooked tomatoes. Because the chutney uses 3 pounds of underripe, highly acidic green tomatoes and 2 cups of tart apple cider vinegar for safe long-term preservation, it requires a massive 2.5 cups of sugar to balance it all out. It's a heavy-handed, aggressive sweet and sour profile. Compare that to the quick-cooked cherry tomato sauce. That builds a much subtler sweet-sour profile using just 5 total tablespoons of balsamic vinegar against naturally sweeter red cherry tomatoes, grounded by savory miso instead of refined sugar.
This shift perfectly captures how our flavor accents just have to change with the preparation method. I mean, our raw and quick-cooked dishes lean entirely on delicate fresh herbs, chopped basil, chives, fresh dill, and parsley. If you boil those for an hour, they'd turn horribly bitter or just lose their flavor entirely. Conversely, long-term storage methods like the green tomato chutney demand heavy, warming spices. We're talking a full 1.5 teaspoons of ground cinnamon and 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cloves. They withstand the boiling and canning process, building deep, preserved flavors that mature beautifully in a jar over months.
So what does this all mean for us? We've deconstructed the culinary logic behind these 6 diverse methods, from delicate, raw herb-stuffed pear tomatoes all the way to a deeply spiced, aggressively simmered green chutney. So I leave you with this. The next time you look at a tomato sitting on your counter, don't just see a basic salad ingredient. Ask yourself, how will you harness heat, acidity, blending, and spices to completely transform it in your next meal? Keep your knives sharp, get creative, and thanks for joining me on this explainer. See you next time.